Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bean's Contractor Roundtable. I'm your host, Parnika. I'm with the sales team here at Beans. And in today's session, we're going to be deep diving on FedEx's newly rolled out 6-day operations. Specifically, what does it mean for FedEx ground contractors? What are some of the staffing challenges that contractors are currently facing or can anticipate facing in the light of this new change? And in the later part of this webinar, we will discuss some effective HR strategies that can potentially help you overcome these challenges or transition to a 6-day operation more effectively. And so to talk about this, we have with us my very good friend and co-host, Shivam. Shivam heads recruiting at Beans, and on this platform, he loves to share industry insights and trends that are coming straight from the ground. Also to contribute to the discussion, we have with us Vikram. Vikram heads product at Beans Route and is a contractor himself who's been contracting with FedEx Ground for several years. So welcome, guys, and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
So Vikram, just to kick things off, I guess it is safe to assume to say that within the contractor community, right, the 6-day working model is a welcome change. It's being very positively received overall by contractors. If I understand it correctly, Sundays have been a money loser for contractors for many years. So it is definitely great, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on how this new change has sort of played out on the ground at your operations, and if it has presented anything, any challenges as far as staffing is concerned at Prologix.
Yeah. So I mean, right off the bat, probably one of the best changes FedEx has implemented, and I think I speak for a lot of contractors who've essentially lost Sunday operations. It's again not everybody in the network. It's purely based on zip codes that FedEx deemed were still critical, for serving customers. So we happen to be one of those lucky ones. And why? If you look at the bottom line, the volumes tended to be low. But I mean, when I say low, that meant essentially on Sundays, right? So if you have low volumes, the total number of routes that you need to dispatch are not linear. Meaning, if you were dispatching 10 routes for 1,000 stops, if your stop count went down to 500, normally you would say, I just need to dispatch half of them, right? But that's not the reality, because the distance and the density of stops decreases quite a bit, right? And that would mean you might only be dispatching a few less routes, might be still stuck at 7 or 8, right? At that point, you're not even breaking even, right? So this, combined with the general drop in volume this year, actually the last few months, was causing a lot of financial stress to a lot of contractors. So I think this is good for the bottom line, because purely from an operations perspective, your revenue is not going to change, right? If you're still getting the same volume, but instead of being spread over 7 days, it's now spread over 6 days. So your operations cost, kind of go down. Hopefully that kind of clarifies what this change is. Now to discuss on the staffing side, again, staffing on Sundays was, challenging, right? Because, everybody wants weekends off. So, and, I'm sure we're going to talk about incentives and stuff. We've tried that, right? Sunday would be, hey, a extra bonus day for folks to come in, and, and their expectation would be, hey, I'm not going to be doing the same number of stops, 200 or 150 stops, because density is not there. So, yeah.
That is great. And then Shivam, would you like to chime in? Like, is that something that you've been hearing from other contractors as well?
No, absolutely. No, Sundays have been a challenge from a staffing perspective, from kind of pretty much the start of Sunday operations. Nobody, everyone is just tuned to expect Sundays being an off day, right? And nobody wants to come in on Sundays, especially after a grueling week delivering packages. Sunday seems to be that one day where everyone wants to call off. And unfortunately, because of the thin volumes in general, they don't seem to be, contractors don't have enough, overlap of people. So, and it's even tougher to kind of, you see the highest number of call-offs typically on a Sunday,
Yep.
and Sunday has the least amount of willing and able people to replace that. So, slightly smallish, like, contractors with 20, 30 routes on a Wednesday. I saw a lot of them having to get into a truck on Sundays, or get their BCs on a truck on Sundays. That was obviously an extremely challenging situation operationally. And, just to add to Vikram's point, right? Sundays have been a money loser for contractors for a very long time. When volumes were high enough, it was, it was justified and compensated by the rest of the week. And as volumes started to trend downwards from the, latter half of last year, the pain became more apparent. Added to that, having to pay incentives and bonuses to get people to come in on a Sunday, that was just a recipe for disaster for a lot of contractors. So, definitely a welcome change, I believe, by the general, contracting community, especially those that got their Sundays back. It also gives people a day to rest, to recharge. I'm sure Vikram's very happy to not get frantic, calls at 6 a.m. From his team on a Sunday, and finally get some time to slow down and rest and, plan for the week ahead.
Great.
Absolutely, yeah.
But just to add a slightly, contrarian point to that. So while, these are all the benefits, I have spoken to enough contractors who've struggled to reorganize their operations for 7 days, not because, of any financial reason. Now, all of a sudden, you've got, to reorganize your existing workforce who were pretty much set. You had people who were weekend only drivers. You had people who were working maybe 3 days or maybe 4 days, or people who were working lesser days but earning more money because of that Sunday incentive. And they'd kind of build their life around that. And now all of a sudden, you're telling your weekend drivers that I only have a 1 day worth of work for you. Or you're telling your person who's getting that $50 extra on a Sunday that, hey, that day is gone. And that, I wouldn't say havoc, I don't want to be dramatic, but that does cause some disruption with a lot of people in terms of operations, right? So maybe we can break this up. So, I don't know if, Vikram, you had weekend only drivers, but a fair amount of contractors choose to do, 5 days regular drivers and then staff specifically with weekend specific drivers. That way, they have less issues of call-offs. Those drivers are typically maybe students, or this is a second job for them. People who are just looking to supplement their existing income. And that strategy, while it's difficult to find those weekend drivers, especially the last few years, it's been a strategy that works for a lot of contractors. Now, all of a sudden, you're cutting the weekend driver supplemental pay by half. And he's not happy. And those weekend drivers are now looking for another job because they can't work Monday to Friday because of any commitments that they may have, but they still need that paycheck of 2 days at the very minimum. Vikram, I'm curious to know if you face this issue and, how you've been able to adapt.
Yeah, so I mean, when Sunday was first rolled out, right, for us, that was a big challenge, right? Not just on the driver side, but on the vehicle side, because we had that 1 day where, you could get, preventive maintenance done, tires need to be replaced, any sort of that, right? So we lost that. That also meant that, your assets that were being, essentially utilized 7 days a week, now you would have to purchase more, just because you don't have spare vehicles. Of course, on Sundays, you don't have as much volume, so not every single vehicle is going to get dispatched, right? But consistently, getting preventive maintenance done was a challenge, right? So now coming back to the staffing side, we tried weekend only folks, right? But based on the market that we operate in, again, very, very challenging. So for most folks, when we schedule people for interview, almost everybody says, hey, I want a Monday through Friday schedule, I want weekends off, right? But that's far from reality, because we have an operation that was running 7 days a week. So not only, I mean, for us, right, what was the challenge? How to schedule people, right, around 7 days. And not only that, when you are trying to schedule people to work only 5 days or even 6 days, right, figure out what those days off are, right? Because now you're telling people, hey, your days off, if you're working 5 days, might be middle of the week. And if
Yeah.
you're lucky, they are consecutive days, right? So telling somebody, hey, you're going to work Monday, and then you're going to take Tuesday off, and then work Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then, maybe take one, weekend day off, right? So that was very, very challenging. Now with Sunday gone, it definitely helps quite a bit, right? So for our staffing, we have folks that typically work 5 days, but we do rotate, people working who want to work 6 days.
Mhm. That is great. All right, so
So go on, Pranika.
let's get to the second segment of the webinar, right? Unless you have something else to add to that, Shivam.
No, we could circle back to it. I think it'll tie into the second segment.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So in the second segment, we wanted to talk again about something that is again very much talked about in the contractor community, which is the new medal system. So of course, FedEx came up with this new ranking system where contractors are awarded gold, silver, or bronze, depending on a variety of different factors that are as of yet fully unknown. However, we can assume that overall safety and efficiency would play a big role in determining the ranking. So Vikram, what are your thoughts on the new medal system?
Uh, I mean, so what are my thoughts? Before I get into that, so let me kind of just technically give you an idea of what medal systems are, right? So basically, FedEx says, we are going to create, these three buckets, and every contractor is going to place in one of those buckets. And what are the inputs? It's essentially service, safety, and customer experience, right? So what is service? Service is your inbound local service, right? You better be at 99.5% or better, right? Pickups, right? So you should not have any missed early or late pickups, because that's going to impact, your medal. And dispatch efficiency. I'll come back to dispatch efficiency, but this is the first time, that, efficiency is being talked about as a metric that FedEx is tracking. Next one, of course, is safety. Safety, as it pertains to accidents, hours of service violations, breaches resulting in non-assignment of driver personnel, essentially driver disqualifications. This could be integrity issues, could be failure to pass a drug test, right? And then you also have roadside inspection issues tied to safety, and of course failing better KIs. And then the third component is customer experience, and that is tied to chargeable complaints. But dispatch efficiency is the first time FedEx is saying that we will actually look at how efficiently you are running your business. So, and how do these factors come into play as far as normalizing them? What is the weighted average? I personally don't know yet, because it hasn't been rolled out to the stations that I'm currently operating out of. So I don't know what middle tier I am in, and I personally don't know what the basis of these calculations are. But
And from what I've understood, Vikram, just to chime in, even those who've been awarded medals don't know on what basis, and there seems to be a lot of confusion and vagueness as to what they are. And I think at best, we can just speculate at best, and try to evaluate where each one lies on these metrics you've just outlined so clearly. So just to chime in on that, right? In terms of the medal system, safety is obviously, we've been seeing this from the last better part of 22, and moving on. Safety became a big issue for FedEx. That's obviously a big expense item for them, and as they look to cut costs across the board, safety naturally takes forefront in that. As FedEx ends up paying millions of dollars in safety complaints. So that makes sense. The one way we've got the most amount of curiosity from the contractor ecosystem is dispatch efficiency. So all of a sudden we've got FedEx Ground. So say I'm a contractor and I run my business profitably. I deliver, I do 99.7. My safety score is good. All of that is good. And I'm making money, so I'm fine. But all of a sudden, FedEx now comes and tells me, hey, no, you're making 2 dispatches too many. Isn't I don't want to comment on where FedEx is coming from, but what I'm trying to get to is who decides this efficiency? And I might be using a transit van because the route has roads which are too thin for a P1200, but FedEx is probably holding me at that standard, saying, hey, that transit van is inefficient. You had to send 2 transit vans. You could just send one, P1000 or P1200. How does that get calculated? Any insight there?
Actually, no, and that's again, my curiosity as well, right? Because again, every business is unique, right? So you cannot compare, a CSA that is primarily rural, where the stop density is just not there, right? So meaning you don't expect a driver to be doing 20, 30 stops an hour, right? And what does that efficiency mean, right? Is it on-road hours? Is it stops per hour? Is it essentially just an empirical formula saying, hey, if you were tendered 1,000 stops, we expect you to have dispatched um, you know 10 routes based on stem miles per se. And again, the other part is, if you're not efficient, uh, right, what sort of impact does that have on your medal tier, right? Just like on the service side, if you have a missed pickup, do you go from a gold to silver? Is one pickup enough? Right. So I think just because it's just being rolled out right now, the FedEx might actually go back and recalibrate, a lot of things just based on, feedback and yeah.
So that makes sense. So fair enough. I guess it doesn't make sense to comment further on something that seems to be evolving,
Yep.
and hopefully clarity and transparency can come up so contractors can recalibrate to this new metric. But speaking of efficiency, because that kind of brought efficiency to this forefront, so far efficiency was looked at by people just as a cost level, but it seems that this might have material impact to your contracts and renegotiations. So this is a concept I think I've spoken about before, on these webinars, but I don't see enough contractors do it. And I'd like to kind of place it in front of everyone. And Vikram, I'd love your opinion as a contractor. So we don't see enough FedEx contractors use the 10-4, scheduling system. So the 10-4 scheduling system, for those who don't know, is widely used at Amazon. It's basically, instead of a typical driver working 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, you schedule him just for 4 days, but 10 hours a day. What that does is helps you in a couple of spaces from where I'm coming from. The first, it especially for those who deliver further away from this terminal, you have individual trucks delivering more, simply because that person's been able to spend more hours on the road, and thus instead of 120 stops, you could do 150 stops, and thus your trucks are being more efficient. You're saving on wear and tear, fuel, depreciation on the trucks. The second advantage is that all of a sudden you've got this workforce which is not used to getting a 3-day weekend, getting that, and that seems to be a very strong pull for a lot of drivers, from a recruiting standpoint, saying, hey, you're going to earn that same $750, $900 a week, but you get, that's only out of 4 days. You get 3 days, you get like a long weekend. And you could do a second job if money is your motivator. You could spend time with your family. You could do whatever. That's number two. The third point, which I think, again, is a big one, especially when Sundays were in effect, but regardless, is someone who's worked 4 days is significantly more willing to come in an extra day to kind of replace someone who's called off, because he'll still have his 2-day weekends. And that really works well, especially for smaller contractors who might have a thinner bench to replace drivers with, and that saves the BC or the contractor from running routes on those days where their driver is short. why do you think, Vikram, my question to you is, do you think there's value in exploring this? Because that does seem to be, being more efficient. Maybe we don't know if FedEx will count that as an efficient metric, but at least from a financial perspective, it seems to be saving people money. It seems to be helping you in recruiting, and it seems to be helping you with scheduling. But what are your thoughts?
So, 410s, we thought about those, right? Especially when going to that 7 day schedule, right? So the other part, again, you mentioned rural routes. I think for those, it might make more sense. For us, which, we operate mostly in, very urban environments with very high density of stops. What that would mean for us, right? So meaning you are shrinking the number of routes dispatched by is essentially, creating more stops per dispatch, right? So two scenarios, right? So now all of a sudden your stops per dispatch are going to go up significantly, right? And the problem over there is, do you have the right capital equipment? Meaning now you would need P1000s, P1200s, right? Uh, and depending on the package mix that your service area gets, like for us, we have a lot of new construction, right? So that means people move in, they're all ordering furniture. So guess what? Even a P1200, is not going to cut it, right? So those are like some of our challenges with doing 410s. But on the scheduling side also, it would be good, but then you still have to maintain that uh, schedule, right? So you have a driver working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right? So what does your coverage look like, for the other days, right? And what does the time off and scheduling look like? Because not everybody is going to have that 3 day weekend starting on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, right? So still, challenges that, you need to kind of resolve.
Well, that's fair enough. And, to be honest, I have got, I've heard both sides. I've heard your side. I've heard people who are apprehensive. They're apprehensive on safety. They're apprehensive of
Yep.
injury. They work on comms claim.
Yep.
And maybe this doesn't make sense for everyone, but I do strongly believe that this is the right solution for a lot of contractors. And I'd encourage people to at least explore this as an option, maybe with a couple of people, and see whether it yields the benefits I might be theoretically thinking it does. But just added to that, 10-4 schedule, Vikram, what are your thoughts with AVP drivers? Do you think that will help you in your quote unquote efficiency benchmarks? We've on this platform, we've spoken about AVPs half a dozen times. Everyone knows being recruiting loves AVPs. But what are your thoughts on AVP drivers, and especially with this change in?
Again, AVP is again one of those variables that we don't know if it's going to have an impact on my metals or not, right? Because now an AVP driver, using their personal vehicle, right, a sedan is not going to be able to fit 150 stops, let alone 50, right? So that means they're probably carrying smalls, right, 50, 60, 70, I would say 80 stops max. And these are like really small shoe boxes, envelopes, those poly bags, and that's pretty much it, right? But now, am I gonna,
Get dinged
be
for
punished for dispatching? I don't know.
So, again, and it's all, speculation at this point, but I'm hearing time and time again where people saying, hey, AVPs don't count under dispatches. And thus that could be like that cheat code one uses to increase their efficiency, if that makes any sense. But no, 100%. So AVPs have a lot of challenges, right? And they're not perfect for most people. But we have seen significant success recently, implementing, something of a, remote station of sorts, where someone takes a bulk truck, loads it up, meets them, drivers 2 hours away at a Walmart parking lot, and they have like 10 AVP drivers come there who then split it up amongst themselves. It's an operational challenge. It requires, again, like I've said, commitment, but it does promised to give itself a lot of benefits. You've got these AVP drivers who don't have to drive 2 hours away,
Yep.
who you're not paying for those 2 hours back and forth. All of a sudden, they're probably delivering their home turf. They're much more familiar. They have vehicles that won't get stuck in a dirt road. And they, you don't have to worry about wear and tear and all of that stuff because it's not your truck in a way. So again, I'll just take this opportunity again to preach. I think AVPs is a very, very viable solution for a lot of contractors. Like Vikram said, we don't know if that makes an impact on the medal system. I'm hearing rumors that it might positively impact it, but yeah, I'd expect FedEx to at some point start factoring that in logically, right? Because that's a metric they can easily track. But no, makes sense. No, thank you for that, Vikram.
That's great. I mean, from my point of view, it seems like it's all a very careful balancing act of right staffing and the right fleet. But no, thank you. That was very super helpful. Thank you so much for your inputs. We have reached the end of our session. Thank you so much for taking the time. And then I guess we'll see you in the next webinar. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.